Welcome back to the Adaptive Athlete Podcast. I'm Mat Hotho, and I'm here with Elina Villemure. She is an adaptive athlete. She was born without her legs, basically. She has one leg that is below the knee and one leg that is above the knee. And this year she's going to be competing in the CrossFit Adaptive Open in the AK division. That's the above knee division. So Elina also leads an adaptive experience seminar, which we're going to talk about. And she's an L1 certified coach. So we'll also talk about that. Elina, welcome so much to the podcast. It's good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Matt.
Yeah. So just to start off, I want to hear about your story, how you got, well, let's wait to talk about how you got into CrossFit, but let's talk about just kind of your adaptation, who you are, and how you're an adaptive athlete.
So I have two prosthetic legs, one above the knee and one below the knee. I was born missing both of my legs. And so that's how I'm an adaptive athlete. I am adopted from Bulgaria. And then I came home into the United States when I was 5.5 years old. And I've grown up with two brothers and have always tried to keep up with them playing sports, such as like football and basketball, especially those are the top two sports that we've always played. And so I've always just kind of like dealt with the prosthetic legs and tried to keep up with everyone growing up. And yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up with two brothers, I mean, and you said playing football and basketball. I mean, so those are sports that definitely require your legs.
Yeah. I would always be quarterback.
Okay.
And for when it came to football, that really required just the upper body and a good throw. So and we used to have a rule where you could not sack Elina. You were not allowed to sack me.
Okay.
So
Yeah. And so did you feel like growing up with brothers and growing up athletic kind of just helped you like not see yourself as different or having a disability, or what was that like?
oh yeah, for sure. So like growing up, I always tried to kind of what everybody else did and not put much attention to the legs. We grew up, our main thing was riding horses, doing the barrel racing. And so there, I mean, you're just sitting on a horse running around barrels. So it really doesn't matter like she has legs or doesn't have legs. I mean, you're just kind of sitting on the horse. And so I grew up doing a lot of that with my brothers, which kind of I feel like normalized it, in a way, because
Yeah.
I was just as good at them as them or better, honestly. But so when I got into CrossFit is when I realized that I needed to stop mimicking so much and that, oh hey, I'm gonna do things differently. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. So you were kind of just trying to exist in an able-bodied environment, almost like just like, okay, I'll just do what you guys do and I'll be okay, right? I'm not going to cause a fuss or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with anyone else who had any type of like disability, adaptation, anything. So it was always just keeping up with all the able-bodied folks.
Yeah. So I mean, that clearly gave you a ton of confidence. I can just see it coming across in how you're sharing your story right now. I mean, just like, yeah, this is how it is. So then at some point you found CrossFit and that started another journey for you, right?
Yep. One of my favorite stories. I love telling this story on how I found CrossFit because I was not looking. Let's just put it that way. It was in my senior year of high school. My best friend and I, that year, we were bored and I needed to go switch one of my classes. So we went to my counselor to go switch my class, but she wasn't there. So we went to the room next door to the next counselor. And I switched my class. And ironically, it was a weightlifting class. I didn't want to do weightlifting. I wanted to do yearbook instead. I was like, I don't want to do that weightlifting stuff. She happens to be the counselor. She happens to be the one who runs an organization, Fire Detroit, Forging Youth Resilience, where it basically brings fitness to the youth and empowers them physically and mentally. And they do it at a CrossFit gym, which is the gym I
Hmm.
work out at now and coach at. But she invited me, and I was like, maybe we'll see. And she kind of just kept like, come on, you should do it. You should go. And eventually I did. And I showed up. I didn't even know I was doing CrossFit. I just thought this is a really weird type of working out. Like, why am I sweating? I just thought I'm going to lift weights. Like, why am I on a rower? Why am I doing all these other different things?
Yeah.
And she and we just worked together all the time on like adapting movements with my prosthetic legs. And that's really the story on that. And now she's like my best friend and helps me with the seminar that we'll talk about later. So yeah.
Yeah. And so you use the word adapting there, saying like she helped you adapt movements with your prosthetic leg. Did you know at the time that what she was doing was adapting, or was it just scaling? Like, was she sort of treating you as like an able-bodied athlete that would maybe have a knee injury that you'd scale, or was she really coming up with creative adaptations for you to like hit the stimulus of the workouts?
Well, at first it was a lot of like gonna try and do everything the way everybody else was doing it. And then eventually it was like, oh hey, so a power snatch isn't really in the cards for Elina, so it's gonna be a muscle snatch.
Yeah.
And just like things like that. And I didn't know what any of it was. And so she just kind of walked me through like, hey, like you'll do better at this like muscle snatch and so
hmm So actually, genuine curiosity, when you do something like a muscle snatch, do you get into the normal snatch start position, or do you kind of treat it more like a deadlift? Are you able to get into that starting position?
so I get into a hang with it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I do all of like the barbell movements from a hang. So a clean and a snatch all comes from a hang.
hmm So let's talk for a second then about your prosthetics that kind of help you get on your feet to then, be able to do these movements. You said one of your amputations is below the knee, another's above the knee. I know that, and we'll talk about divisions a little bit later, but I know that typically in adaptive divisions, there's a distinction made as an athlete's impairment below the knee or above the knee. For you, you have both. So does one of your prosthetics have a fake knee and the other one doesn't?
Yes. So I have a computerized knee on my right leg and it's a sweet knee. I charge it like every night and it's programmed to just walk with me and do things with me. There's cycling mode on there so I can put it on cycling mode where the resistance will loosen up. It'll be a very like just loose flowing knee and then I can bike and cycle. So I always like love biking in a CrossFit class with cardio. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one that is just below the knee, does it have any mechanism in the ankle to give you like an ankle bounce or kick or
No.
anything like that? Okay.
No, it does not. Only because we thought I never needed that. Just because I've had this my whole life and I've grown up with it and I've adapted very well to having two prosthetic legs. It's been 20 years of it. So because of that, we just felt that that was never really necessary.
Okay. But I guess for people who are curious about how prosthetics work, there is an option to have an active ankle as well as an active knee. Like you could have
Yes.
both
Yes.
flexion. Okay. Wow.
Hmm.
That's really interesting. So then you can adjust that knee as needed for the certain activity you're doing. Um, but still, when it comes to barbell work, you're most efficient out of the hang.
Yep.
Okay. Do
Yep.
you deadlift?
I do. It's my hardest movement that I can do. Because of course
Okay.
there's movements where I'm just like, yeah, I'm really not gonna be doing that one. But a deadlift I can do. It's my hardest one though, because you're driving through your hamstrings and I
Right.
just one leg I have my hamstrings, but then the other one I'm missing a lot from that leg, my above knee leg. And so when I driving through that leg is really difficult. So I do
Yeah, right.
deadlift, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, when the coach says use your posterior chain and you're like, I don't have one.
Right.
There's not
Yeah.
one on that side. Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. So you've done CrossFit, your friend got you into it, was adapting the movements for you, and then you seem to have, I mean, really fallen in love with adaptive CrossFit. Tell me a little bit about that journey. I know you got your L1 and you do this experience for people who want to experience what it's like to be an adaptive athlete. So why don't you tell me about that experience and then tell me about what it was like getting your L1?
Okay, so as far as what the experience, it's called the Adaptive Athlete Experience. And this is a seminar that we made. It's a 90-minute seminar to put people through what it is like to work out as an adaptive athlete and hope that they learn the best ways for like modifying and adapting. And then our goal is to equip gyms and coaches and trainers and athletes with the tools and knowledge to help themselves or anybody else with a diverse need. It would suck for like, let's say someone to roll into a gym, right, in a wheelchair, and then the coach be like, "Oh, I don't know how to help you. I've never worked with an adaptive. I don't know." And it's not that the coach is mean or anything. It's just they don't know. And
Right.
so if I can give them somewhat of an idea of where to start, that's the goal.
hmm So give me an example of a couple of the adaptations that you teach.
So we have four in the seminar. They're the easiest, I guess you could say, to like simulate in a way. We have seated, where they just do the movements seated, and then lower extremity. So I have them do the movements, taking away a leg or taking away function below their knee. And then upper extremity, taking away an arm. And then visual, it's really easy to just stick blindfolds on people and be like, all right, now do whatever. I try to make it all kind of like CrossFit, like functional. And so we have the burpee, which is getting to the ground and back up. We have the deadlift, picking something up off the ground, shoulder to overhead, something from shoulder to overhead, all functional that I think that with these 4 adaptations, you can still do.
Right.
Whether or not I'm in a wheelchair, if I fall out of my wheelchair, I should be able to get back in my wheelchair.
Yeah.
I want to get back in my wheelchair. And then we just added jump roping, but with the adaptive jump ropes to just show, hey, like this is adaptive equipment. It exists.
Yeah.
It's out there. Put it in your gym.
Yeah, like a mono rope, right? Like try that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We do use the mono rope.
Did you watch the adaptive games at all? Did you happen to see any of the adaptive?
I saw some clips. They had like that really heavy, thick mono rope.
That was the funnest thing ever. Really?
That thing looked so hard.
We bought one for our gym, and it's just been fun to kind of throw it at able-bodied people sometimes. Be like, here, try this out. It's so fun. So I like that idea of the adaptive movements being a pulling movement, a pressing movement, and then a very functional, like you got to get up off the ground. So I think that's really cool that those are the big movements that you teach in your course for able-bodied people to be able to adapt and teach to adaptive athletes who need those skills.
Because I think those are the most important. Is like, I don't need you doing like box jumps or, like wall balls, like something. I'm like, let's just stick to the basics. And then you can take what you learn from the basics and apply it to really these other movements too. So,
yeah. And, that's reminding me of something. I'm trying to figure out how to tell my story as well throughout some of these podcast episodes. And I just remember the first time I was doing CrossFit, I walked into the gym and I told the lady at the front desk, I was like, I have CP. I don't know what I need. I don't know how it's going to impact me, anything like that. And she goes, well, my mom was a PT. Let's see what we can do. And she just started giving me basically the PT exercises that I used to do as a kid that I hated, but doing them with an AMRAP style, right? Or an EMOM style. And it was like, oh, there's intensity now. And it was that intensity piece combined with it that was like, okay, let's go. And then when she would scale some things I couldn't squat when I started CrossFit. I didn't know how to bring my hips down below my knees. And so getting to learn that through a coach that was willing to say, let's just start by banding and holding onto the rig and getting into that range of motion. So all that to say, the work you're doing is going to make such a difference for able-bodied coaches to be able to come in and take any adaptive athlete that comes in off the street and think a little bit differently and just take it a little bit differently.
That's the goal. And it's the goal also too, to be like, oh, hey, like we're an inclusive gym, and hope that like, because we did this seminar, we're an inclusive gym, and hope that you'll get adaptive athletes in your gym too.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the L1 then. So walking into your L1, did you wear like sweatpants or something like that and try and bury the lead for as long as you could?
Yes. So I did. Yes, I did have sweatpants on the first, because there's 2 days of the L1. So on the first day of the L1, I did wear sweatpants. And yeah, I just didn't really say much until kind of like you, like when we got into our groups. And then it was like the first one was like the squat. And I was like, oh, hey, like I'm going to need a box like to do my squat. And then that's when I told him, like, I have 2 prosthetic legs. Like, I need a box if I want to reach any type of depth that's like valid. So yeah.
And so how did you, what was, if you can go into that experience just a little bit, what was it like kind of going into those breakouts? I guess the press, but I mean, they teach the deadlift, the sumo deadlift high pull, that med ball clean. Like, did you find that going into those small breakout groups, like you had to advocate for yourself?
I honestly really tried to do the movements like everyone else. That was that's when I started CrossFit, that was where my head was like at first. And I didn't get my L1 very far into like my CrossFit journey. That person who I was saying, her name is Kelsey, who got me into CrossFit and invited me. She was the one who was also like, oh, hey, go get your L1. Like, you're signed up, go get your L1. And so, so I really just tried to like mimic everybody else for the longest time. And the L1 was like a perfect example of that. The only thing really was like the squat where I was like, oh, hey, like I am going to need a box for that. And that was about it. Like I did try to do those med ball cleans off the ground, and it probably didn't look great and wasn't like very honestly efficient,
Yeah.
knowing now what I know. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think about that other workout that was the burpee thruster workout. Like I just,
Oh my goodness. I did. I'm trying to think. I used a box for my burpees.
yeah.
'Cause it takes me a long, I've gotten better, but especially at first, I'd never practiced burpees. So it took me a long time to get down and back up. And
Yeah.
so it was really quick when I could just go like down on a box, do kind of like a
hmm
push up and go back up.
Yeah. Yeah, an elevated burpee, right. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
totally makes sense as an adaptation for someone like
hmm
yourself, right? To keep that stimulus of not having to go so slow that your heart rate's not getting up, that kind of stuff. You're more so just getting frustrated, right?
Right. That's kind of what we do at the seminar. I was like, okay, so like, yes, the burpee, get to the ground and back up. But now we have all of these other options too for you to do in a workout where like you can raise that intensity. And it might not be getting all the way to the ground and back up.
Yeah. So, are you signed up for the 2025 Open?
I sure am.
So let's talk about that. What category?
So I don't have a category. I signed up in the above knee category, but as we mentioned, I have two prosthetic legs, a below knee and an above knee. And so it's kind of like a shot in the dark. I'm going to see where it goes and what happens. I also could have signed up for the seated category. The only thing with that is I'm just not training seated. I'm
Mhm.
training on my legs to be functional on my legs. And so yeah, I'm signed up in the above knee category. We'll see how it goes when they pull out double unders, where they do double unders on the one leg. I'm definitely, not going to be able to do that one. Hopefully, there will be an adaptive division, bilateral amputee adaptive division soon in the CrossFit Games.
That would seem like the right division for you. I mean, especially because what I've noticed that they're doing is they're also increasing, and I say they, by they, I mean, and this is not in a bad way, but they, I mean, Wheelwad, right? Like who kind of oversees some of the programming is they're sort of raising the bar of what they expect from us as athletes.
Uh-huh.
I
They
mean,
really are.
yeah, they introduced double unders for us in chest to bar in neuro moderate, which really was, I hadn't done chest to bar until the 2023 games where they came up in the competition. And I was like, oh, I got to learn these.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
and I wouldn't be shocked if at some point they gave us probably not handstand push-ups because with the imbalance and strength on my right side, I don't think I could actually support myself upside down. But they've given us double unders, and they've given us. I think they might give us bar muscle ups at some point, like something just to really push that like gymnastics
hmm
to the next level.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so you're gonna register in the AK division, hoping that they don't give you double unders. And I saw that you've been training with another AK, this well known. Are you friends with Amy Bream and you train with her sometimes?
Yeah, so I would say Amy and I are friends. We will message each other every once in a while back and forth. So how that happened was this past summer I went to Nashville to visit a friend, and it was a shot in the dark. I reached out to Amy and I was like, "Hey, like I'm going to be in Nashville. It'd be so cool to work out with you." And she was like, "Yeah, I would love to." And gave me her gym and a time, and I was there for like 2 hours. And I just have to say, like, about Amy, like it wasn't just a workout. It was like I came in and she was like, "Hey, so like what do you want to learn from me? What do you want to work on?" So the first hour we just spent working on barbell movements, because that's where I would say like is like one of my biggest struggles is like with barbell movements. So we worked on snatching and cleaning, and then her and I did a workout together, and I was like, wow, like she just let me take like 2 hours of her time, and she
Yeah.
like was so kind about it. And yeah, great human being.
That's really cool. I'm so glad that she was able to be so open-handed with you to kind of give you a leg up. I think, isn't that what she calls her program actually? A leg
Yeah.
up?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And did I see in the video that you guys are doing handstand walks?
Yes.
So you
Yes.
can do handstand walks.
Oh yeah. I mean, growing up, like missing both of my legs, like how I would get around if I didn't have my legs on would be on my hands. And so getting upside down on my hands and walking around has never been a problem.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. I'm so envious. I would love to be able to get upside down. That would be so cool. Okay, do you have any goals for the 2025 Open?
Man, that's a really good question. I would say like my goals, I guess, would be to get like through those three workouts and then progress to the next level. Like it would really be cool to make semifinals. I'm not sure if I'm gonna exactly see the games only because like I'm still competing with people who have a full leg. And
Yeah.
so that's definitely hard to compete with. But it'd be really cool to at least be like, oh hey, like I'm a semifinals adaptive CrossFit Games athlete, you know?
Yeah.
So
Cool.
that'd be sweet.
All right. Well, let's hit a lightning round real quick and let's see kind of, we'll do some would you rathers kind of in CrossFit environment. And then I've also got some other questions. So this is my first one. I had this one written down before we even talked about these. Would you rather do 100 wall balls or 100 burpees?
100 wall balls or 100 burpees? 100 wall balls.
Really? Okay. And then would you rather ski or bike?
Ooh, oh my goodness. Probably ski. I really do like the skier. We only have one at the gym, so sometimes it's hard to get like my hands on it, get your hands on it because there's only one. But yes, I'd have to say ski.
Okay. If you could pick the music at the gym for every day, what would be playing?
It would be playlist and it's like club music.
Okay.
Like Pitbull, we at the hotel, motel,
Yes. Mr. Worldwide. I mean,
Mr. Worldwide,
you
yeah.
got to have Mr. Worldwide. I got you. That's good. Okay. If you could create your ideal workout, what would it be?
Toes to bar and handstand walks.
Okay. So what's your standard for toast to bar? You just wear your legs and when you're
Yeah, I just wear the legs, toes hit the bar. I mean, yeah, I've always made a joke that like I could just take my leg off and just touch the bar with the leg, and
right.
that's the standard, right? Your toe needs to hit the bar. Well, it is, but for some reason, toes to bar and handstand walks are like the two movements that make me look like I'm really good at CrossFit.
All right. So as we get ready to wrap up, I wonder if there's someone who's listening to this who's new to CrossFit or they're adaptive and they're maybe considering CrossFit, what advice would you give them?
It would be the same advice Amy gave me when I met her in the summer and we did our workout. It would be don't mimic others. Like, hey, I have two prosthetic legs. I'm missing both of my legs. Like, I am going to do a burpee differently than you. I am going to do a clean, a snatch differently than you, and that's okay. I don't
Mm,
need to sit here and try to do it the exact way that you would. And so that's would be my number one thing would be like, hey, like stop mimicking others, don't mimic others. The way you move is the way you move, and the way Bobby over there moves is the way Bobby moves.
yeah.
So
So then the flip side of that is what advice would you give to a coach that's coaching an adaptive athlete, right? Because in our L1, we're taught like, what's the points of performance for a movement? And it's tough as
sure.
coaches sometimes, right? Because we do have a standard that we try and get people, maybe not to mimic, but to kind of meet. So what advice would you give a coach that's working with an adaptive athlete?
The advice I would probably have to give to a coach that is working with an adaptive athlete would be to m- modify for your athlete, but don't scale. I feel like the first thing, like sometimes, is like, oh, hey, we're just gonna scale.
Yeah.
Instead, it's not looked. Sometimes it's not scaling. It's you have to modify. So a perfect example for me would be like, let's say like for the snatch, I'm not going to ever lift as heavy and get a bar over my head like somebody like would with all four limbs
Hmm.
that everything is functioning correctly because I don't have that power for my legs to get that bar over my head in a snatch. And so, but that's not saying that I'm scaled. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's what I would just my advice for coaches would be like, hey, like when you adapt for your athlete, don't try to scale. Don't look at it as scaling. Instead, look at it as modifying and adapting and still reaching that stimulus. And if you can, reach the standards, of course, too. But yeah,
Yeah. Nice. I love that advice for the coaches because I think that's a missing piece of it too, right? Especially if you get a coach that was taught, no, this is what a squat looks like, right? And then you get that adaptive athlete, you try and make them hold that standard, and it's just frustration for everybody,
right.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, and then one other question. This will be our final question. If you could talk to a younger version of yourself and give them some encouragement, what would you say?
Honestly, what I would say to my younger version would be like, hey, stop caring so much what other people think.
Mm,
Because like growing up through school and middle school and high school especially, like I cared so much about like what everybody thought, if they thought I was cool or if like they wanted to be my friend, and you know what I'm saying. And it's like maybe an insecurity thing like deep down, but that's like how I spent most of my like school years, was really like trying to fit in and make everyone like me. And the truth is, not everyone's going to like you. And that is like completely okay.
yeah,
And it's so much better to be yourself, because then the people who do like you, not like this facade that you've been putting on, whatever that is. So that's probably what I would say to my younger self is like, hey, stop caring so much what everyone else thinks.
yeah. Man, I needed to hear that right now at 38, man. Not everybody's gonna like you. They're not gonna like the facade that you put on. They want to like you, not that face that you put on.
Right.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, Elina. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this podcast. You got any final words or anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Thank you, Matt. And if I were to give a shout out to anybody, it would be who I've mentioned a couple times in this podcast. It would be Kelsey. She got me into CrossFit and she believed in me before I believed in myself. And that is a true coach, is believing in your athlete before they even believe in themselves. So she's true like that. So she's where my shout out would go.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Elina. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a good day. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of The Adaptive Athlete. I really enjoyed what Elina said at the end about what she would say to her younger self, right? Like, just don't put up that facade. And I know for a lot of us who are adaptive, we hide behind our facades, right? We kind of either hide behind being really smart or fake false confidence, right? We kind of tell ourselves that we've got it all together because maybe we don't have it all together because we haven't accepted sometimes some things about ourselves. Sometimes we need mentors. Sometimes we need friends to help us on that journey. And if you're not an adaptive athlete, you can still probably hear some truth in that. And if you're a coach, there was so much in Elina's conversation about how to coach adaptive athletes and what to do with them. So that's the purpose of this podcast. This is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to connect coaches and athletes and adaptives and non-adaptives and caregivers and just get everybody together having conversations about how to make adaptive people healthier and get them involved in fitness. So thanks so much for joining us. If you like this episode, share it with somebody and make sure you subscribe.